G'day legends, I hope that you're having a really great day. Now, we're back onto our normal news cycle, look at the map. So today, we're going to look at some recruitment stuff, some more footage that's come out, both Russian and Ukrainian, and we're going to look at what's happening at the UN and what's happening between Ukraine and Poland, as there's a lot of tension there. And as well, we're going to go over the New York Times article regarding if it was an air defense missile or a Russian missile that struck in Constantinivka earlier this month as well. But where I want to start is there is footage that has come out of a Ukrainian MiG-29 struck by a Russian Lancet drone, said to be 70 kilometers behind the line. Now, we're going to have a look exactly where this is and do some measurements, things like this. So let's have a look at then the video then first. That isn't the video. This one will be. So here we have, I don't know why they had all this shitty music here. Now, a lot of the reason why footage and stuff like this comes out really shit is a lot of the time either it's stepped on a lot where it's just been uploaded, reshared, whatever, that it, gets just compressed down and down, or they really make the footage look shitty so you don't actually know the full extent of the equipment being used. We would do things like this as well, but this is a Russian Lancet drone. We're going to look at why this is interesting too. So we can see other planes here as well. Okay, coming down on a MiG-29 and hits just to the right side of then the canopy. You can see a small strike. There's a Lancet there. Now, it's unknown how much damage actually then occurred, but we know it wasn't destroyed. Fighter bomber, a Russian source who does this sort of thing, and this is where we get the confirmation of Russian planes going down too. It says a Lancet kamikaze drone attack on an Air Force MiG-29 fighter at an airbase in here, Dnipro region. The nearest positions of the Russian armed forces are about 70 kilometers away, which is a record. Apparently, a new version of everyone's favorite attack drone is involved. We'll talk about this. The plane was not destroyed, but the reach of such a target with our Lancets would make the enemy very nervous, especially considering that the strike was corrected from a Zala Recon UAV. Now, of course, again, air defense, things like this. But where we're going to look at it for everyone's favorite attack drone, a new version, was the range said to be of a Lancet drone was 40 kilometers. And we know this is more like 70. So here we have, of course, it's an older Google image, but it does look like this airbase was somewhat just abandoned by the actual upkeep of it here. So that is where it is. Now we're going to go across the deep state. So this is the same base here. So let's keep this in the middle so to get some level of measurement. Let's say we're about here. Closest here, 68. So this is going to be in and out a little bit. We'll just move this. Let's look. So 67.5, pretty bloody close on my behalf. So yeah, it's gone a fair way somewhere, and that is the closest position. It could be a little bit back. So we do know that Russia, with those drones now, can strike further into Ukraine as well. Now, something interesting I did see pointed out was this is the footage coming in, and what could have prevented all this? Could have put some fucking tires on that bad boy. I do want to say, MiG-29, take away the capability of in the air. I think a MiG-29 is the best looking fighter jet ever made. For me, it goes MiG-29, F-14. I just think it's just a classic look. Like if you got a kid and said draw a fighter jet, it would look like a MiG-29. I know the F-35 would smoke it, but the F-35 looks like a fucking bug. Anyway, there's been a lot of talk about how much damage there would actually be. And look, we don't really know. We'll figure it, but it's probably got some. So I was just thinking like a normal F1 grenade, like one an Australian would carry, if I remember correctly, has a kill radius of about 6 meters with the ball bearings out of a 60-gram charge, where a Lancet has a 5-kilogram charge, or at least an original one. We're not sure on that one. Maybe that charge has dropped, or I should say 5 kilograms of explosive. That would include what actually comes out as well. Sorry. But it's still significantly more than, say, a grenade. Maybe they've dropped that to make them go further. That's the weight is the enemy of drones. But what I'm getting at is there's probably some substantial damage, especially striking right near the cockpit where, of course, all the electronics are, but maybe it's fine also. Now, a new Russian recruitment ad has come out as well, and I love recruitment ads. I don't care if it's from Australia, America, North Korea, the Taliban, Russia, whatever they are, always funny. No country in the world seems to be able to do them. So let's have a quick squeeze over this, and this has been translated to English as well. So here we see these guys clearing the trench systems.
Случайно не знаешь, где Печерские пагорбы в Киеве?
Это центр. У меня там тетка живет. Крутой район. А чего?
Мечта у меня. Квартиру там хочу купить.
So talking about buying property, real estate in Ukraine, in Kyiv.
Война закончится. Киев вернем.
So of course talking about when we recapture Kyiv. So this is interesting as well. Choose the city of your dreams. Bloody join. And then at the end,
А я в Одессу рвану. Море люблю.
so very interesting because it does seem like Russia's goal of capturing Ukraine sort of did fade away, but things like that tend to show maybe they still have that dream of actually trying on Ukraine. Now, like I've said many times, I don't believe that Russia and or Ukraine have currently the military power to actually do their where they want their operations to go without some level of diplomatic thing. Like, I don't believe that Russia has the power to take the rest of Ukraine, especially somewhere like Kyiv, Lviv. I don't believe that. And also militarily, I don't think Ukraine has the power to take back Donetsk, Crimea, but there could be other deals. And if they put the hurt on Russia somewhere else, maybe that will be swapped back. But I believe it's going to be more like that rather than sort of your front line up the guts attack style. But as cringy as this ad is, it still makes me cringe a lot less than our like Disney-style woke ads where apparently war is just like a social justice playground and not actually war. Like if this one was an Australian one, it wouldn't be two white dudes. But either way, now what we do want to look over as well is we know there was attacks. I think I'm bumping my mic. And we know there was some successful attacks into Crimea from Ukraine that took out a landing craft and as well a submarine. Now, this was a Kilo-class submarine, the Rostov-on-Don. We didn't know the extent of the damage. Now, we have had some photos that come out. Now, of course, this was in the dry dock, and it appears to show 2 strikes here as well as damage to the sail as well. And this is significant amount of damage, especially on something like a submarine that, of course, has to be pressurized. So 2 strikes, major damage. You and I, we're not submarine experts, but I would say this probably isn't going in the water. And I think if it did go in the water, may have the same fate as the Ocean Gate submarine. So major loss there. And it is a major loss. Yes, it was in the dry dock. Yes, whatever. It's not one of the big nuclear subs. But at the end of the day, it's still something that can carry the caliber cruise missiles, which we have seen rain down across Ukraine for a long time now. One of the big things that has come out is the New York Times has done an investigation into the Constantinivka bombing where 17 civilians were killed and injured 30 more. This happened earlier this month. And they've come to the conclusion that the evidence suggests that this was a Ukrainian missile. And this was speculated via the video footage really within a few hours after this happened, of which way the people turned, which way the missile came. And because I sort of brushed around this, I copped a lot of shit too. But I said at the time, I don't have enough information available to me to make the decision on whose it was. But like I said with this, well, the air defense wouldn't have had to be present if Russia didn't invade. But it still is important of whose it actually was, as this is being used, I guess, a lot politically. So let's look over what the New York Times has done. And you can look this article up. I'll just brush over it here. So the September 6th missile strike on Constantinivka in eastern Ukraine was one of the deadliest in the country in months, killing at least 15. The Guardian said 17, I'm not sure, in between that, and injuring more than 30 others. The weapon's payload of metal fragments struck a target, piercing windows and walls and wounding some victims beyond recognition. 2 hours later, President Volodymyr Zelensky blamed Russian terrorists for the attack, and many media outlets followed suit. Throughout its invasion of Ukraine, Russia has repeatedly and systemically attacked civilians and struck schools, markets, residences as a deliberate tactic to instill fear in the populace. In Constantinivka in April, they shelled homes and a preschool, killing 6. But evidence collected and analysed by the New York Times, including missile fragments, satellite imagery, witness accounts and social media posts, strongly suggests the catastrophic strike was a result of an errant Ukrainian air defence missile fired by a Buk system. The attack appears to have been a tragic mishap. Air defense experts say missiles, like the one that hit the market, can go off course for a variety of reasons, including electronic malfunction or a guidance fin is damaged. And we know that these are older missiles. These are Soviet systems. These are going to be older missiles in these tubes, potentially even out of date. The likely missile failure happened amid the back and forth battles common in the surrounding area. Russian forces shelled Constantinivka the night before. Ukrainian artillery fire from the city was reported in local Telegram group just minutes before the strike on the market. Now, a spokesman for Ukrainian armed forces at the country's security service is investigating the incident under national law, cannot comment further. The authorities initially tried to prevent journalists with the Times from accessing the missile debris and impact area in the strike's immediate aftermath, but the reporters were eventually able to get to the scene, interview witnesses, and collect remnants of the weapon used. We're going to look over some of these bits. Now, security camera footage shows the missile flew into Constantinivka from the direction of Ukrainian-held territory, not from behind Russian lines. As the sound of the approaching missile is heard, at least 4 pedestrians appear to simulate as you turn their heads toward the incoming sound. They face the camera in the direction of Ukrainian-held territory. Moments before the strikes, the missile's reflection is visible as it passes over the cars, and we've looked at this previously, and you can look up in the footage. So, this security camera footage. People then turn their head, these 4 people, and you can see the missile reflection across the vehicles as well. And then we have where the missile was, the crater and the scarring of the impact across down here. And you can see that it has rained down like fragments from here. Missile's warhead detonates a few yards above the ground shortly before impact, blasting metal fragments outward. The resulting crater damage extending from the point of detonation is consistent with a missile coming from a northwesterly route, according to explosive experts on the Times. And I'd say as well, this is very common, does go with being an air defense missile as well, with the amount of fragmentation as well in this. And we saw a big, fire boom as well with this. Now, further evidence reveals that minutes before the strike, the Ukrainian military launched 2 surface-to-air missiles towards a Russian front line from the town of Druzhkivka, 10 miles northwest of Konstantinivka. Reporters with the Times were in Druzhkivka when they heard an outgoing missile launch at 2 p.m, followed a few minutes later by a second. By chance, one member of the team recorded the first launch in a voice message. You can hear it in the voice message on this. So, this is where then it hit, and the missile launched at 2 p.m. from Druzhkivka here. Now, 2 witnesses who spoke to the Times said they saw the missiles being fired from Druzhkivka in the direction of the Russian front line at the time of the strike. One of them said he saw missiles going in the direction of Konstantinivka. A Ukrainian soldier stationed here, who was remaining anonymous, said he heard 2 missile launches around the same time. One of the witnesses also said the missiles were launched from fields out on the outskirts of the town. A place residents say is used by the Ukrainian military and have seen air defense missiles. This is a really good investigative breakdown here. Now, they're in this area and they can see the trenching and the scorching where a missile will take off places like this. They visited where they visited the site, and of course the scorch marks are in line with something that has launched missiles. You'll see this from anything from air defense to Grad to HIMARS, bits and pieces like that. So the actual missile. In the aftermath of the attack, Ukrainian authorities said Russia used a missile fired by an S-300 AD system, which Russia has used both to intercept aircraft and strike targets on the ground. But S-300 carries a different warhead from the one that exploded in Constantinivka, so it wasn't an S-300. Many have also said it could have been a harm, but let's go through this. The metal facades of buildings closest to the explosion were perforated with hundreds of square or rectangular holes, probably made by cube-like objects blown outwards from the missile. Measurements of the holes and fragments found at the scene are consistent with the size and shape of one weapon in particular, the 9 Mike 38 missile, which is fired by the mobile Buk AA vehicle. Ukraine is known to use the Buk system, as is Russia. Some of the holes are less than 10 millimeters in width, while others are slightly larger. The 9M38 contains 2 different sizes of these cubic fragments, both 8 millimeters and 13 millimeters, showing the size then of the fragment and where they've hit then the holes here. So, the Times reporter also reviewed other missile fragments recovered from multiple locations in Ukraine that had been fired by Russian S-300, 400 and Buk systems, as well as 2 different American air defense systems. Their shapes and measurements show that the damage at the market site was likely caused by a 9M38, so a Buk system. Then 2 independent bomb disposal experts who asked to remain anonymous so they could speak candidly, came to the same conclusion and said the fragments and damage at the strike are most consistent with the 9 Mike 38. Now, one thing I will say in this is, and the same with my interviews, that all these people are staying anonymous because there is an informational war behind the war as well. Why do you think that I was labelled as an information terrorist? Now, I'm not saying everything is a lie, but if everyone needs to remain anonymous, well, I think there's probably some issues there people need to look at as well. Now, several witnesses either heard or saw Ukrainian forces firing surface-to-air missiles from Druskivka towards Constantinivka at the time of the strike. The evidence collected at the market shows the missile came in that direction. The missile has a max range of 17 miles and it's about 10 miles away. At such a short range, the 10 miles, the missile is most likely to have landed with some unspent fuel rocket in its motor, which would detonate and burn upon impact, offering the possible explanation for the widespread scorch marks at the market and the footage of it. We do see flame there as well. Now, advisor to President Ukraine, Mikhailo Podolyak, has then had this to say, come back at it. No doubt, the appearance of publications in foreign media with doubts about Russia's involvement in the attack on Constantinivka entails the growth of conspiracy theories and therefore requires examination and legal assessment by the investigative authorities. The society will surely receive an answer to the question of what exactly happened in Constantinivka. As in the thousands of other instances of Russian strikes on our country as part of an unprovoked war, however, it should be borne in mind that the law enforcement agencies by default conduct a thorough and detailed investigation into each case as part of the recording and documentation of Russian war crimes, among other things. The circumstances of the strike in Constantinivka are also being studied. In any case, the legal truth will be established. In the meantime, we must not forget it was Russia that launched the invasion of Ukraine, and in Russia that is responsible for bringing war to our country. And it is Russia that regularly launches massive missile, bomb and drone strikes against civilian infrastructure and civilians. Ukraine, on the other hand, conducts exclusively defensive actions, defending itself and its territories. But saying that they've looked into it, and there is no doubt here as well, but that there's still going to be further investigation. And a lot of this information, I think, has come out that isn't conspiracy. These people are putting things together. And we know there has been air defense go off target before and strike Ukrainian areas as well. And I don't think anyone's pointing the finger going like, you're the bad guys for this. But they're just searching more for the truth. And, you know, the truth will never harm a just cause. And that's what I'll say. The air defense there, that is a just cause. But the truth of something that happened, it won't affect the just cause. People just want to know the actual truth, if that makes sense. Anyway, if we're allowed it. There's a lot of tension between Poland and Ukraine as there's ongoing arguments regarding really agricultural export. Now, it's being reported that Ukraine will introduce an embargo on onions, tomatoes, cabbage, and apples from Poland. So they're not allowed to come in. According to the Polish news outlet, the decision was made in order to convince Poland to, quote, take a step back and agree to the grain trade licensing mechanism developed in cooperation with the European Union, for which Ukraine will be responsible. Now, Ukraine has speculated to actually sue these states, well, potentially sue these states. So let's have a look over this, and this was from Al Jazeera. So Kyiv is considering suing Poland, Hungary, Slovakia over their bans on Ukrainian agricultural products. The magazine on Monday quoted Ukrainian trade representative Taras Kachka as saying Kyiv could also impose reciprocal measures on Poland if Warsaw did not drop its additional steps. Now, of course, Poland wanted to put in more things about the grain than the EU did. They're still their own state. Although they're within the EU, they can sort of do what they want in the state. Saying we would be forced to retaliate on the additional products and would prohibit the import of fruit and vegetables from Poland. Now, this then continues. According to Politico, Kyiv also plans to sue the countries at the World Trade Organization, not through its trade accord with the EU, saying, I think that all the world should see how member states in the EU behave towards trade partners on their own union, because it can influence other states as well. Now, President Duda has said in response to this, it would be good for Ukraine to remember that it receives help from us and to remember that we are also a transit country to Ukraine. So a transit country, of course, people have to come through Poland to get to Ukraine. And the amount of support Poland has actually given Ukraine. Now, in May, the EU imposed restrictions that allowed Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, Romania and Bulgaria to ban the domestic sale of Ukrainian wheat, maize, rapeseed and sunflower seed. but it did still permit the transit of these products through these countries to then be exported elsewhere. Now, this did cause really uproar in the government and farmers because they were complaining that this really undercut their local trade. Now, although the EU decided to not extend the ban beyond September the 15th, so 5 days ago, Poland, Slovakia and Hungary have continued restrictions on Ukrainian agricultural products, and Romania's off doing their bloody own thing, probably with Andrew Tate in charge somewhere. But what I want to say is Poland has been one of Ukraine's biggest supporters and has more weight of Ukrainian refugees than any other country, and along with massive military assistance. And Warsaw has decided to assist Ukrainian refugees by waiving residency requirements and providing free access to education, healthcare, and family benefits. So we're going to speak on that more actually in a sec as that is ending. But I can see the argument here between this sort of trade deal going on that, you know, these countries want to protect their trade. Ukraine doesn't have that much else to put out to just keep their GDP actually running. So it is a difficult situation here, of course, without being able to go out the Black Sea. Well, they can go out the Black Sea, but not in the amount Ukraine would like because of, you know, Russia taking up the majority of the south of Ukraine. That has caused a lot of issues, but it causes issues for the local farmers, local import-export in these countries as well. Now, I spoke on just before that Warsaw has had so much help by the residence requirements, the access to healthcare, the free access, and all the family benefits, everything to Ukrainian refugees. Well, next year, Poland has said that these will expire. So a Polish government spokesman has said these regulations will simply expire next year. So there's been a lot of uproar about this too, but what a lot of people said is, well, we're 2 years into war, and as much as 85% I've seen of these refugees have got jobs, and people say that there's enough time, 2 years by next year is enough time for people to get work and support themselves from there. But it will be interesting to see if where this war goes, if more people have to go into somewhere like Poland or these states, what will then happen there. But as far as I see, these tensions will do far more harm to Ukraine than it could to any of these EU member states. And I can see the thinking of both sides, but I do think there has to be a bit of like, don't bite the hand that feeds you. Now, Zelensky has also addressed the United Nations, talking about Ukraine's nuclear disarmament in 1994 under the Budapest Memorandum. Now, let's have a look over this. Now, that wasn't just the nuclear weapons too. That was also long-range strategic bombers like the Tu-22s, Tu-95s that we see Russia using to strike in Ukraine as well. So let's have a look at what Zelensky has actually said here.
Ukraine gave up its third largest nuclear arsenal. The world then decided Russia should become a keeper of such power.
So, of course, this agreement was between the nuclear powers of, you know, security guarantees for Ukraine to get rid of the nuclear weapons, but of course Russia and the US and other states in there, France, UK, whatever, who have nuclear weapons could keep them. That said, Russia kept them, but as people say, these were Soviet nukes that went back to Russia.
Yet history shows it was Russia who deserved nuclear disarmament the most back in 1990s. And Russia deserves it now. Terrorists
so calling Russian terrorists that they deserve to be disarmed of their nuclear weapons.
No right to hold nuclear weapons. No right. But truly, not the nukes are the scariest now. While nukes remain in place, the mass destruction is gaining its momentum. The aggressor is weaponizing many other things, and those things are used not only against our country, but against all of yours as well.
So, of course, no nuclear weapons have been used, but he does say here about the threat of mass destruction and things that are happening. Now, but what I will say on this is 1994, Ukraine was a very different country to what it is now. We know still even now, Ukraine does have a lot of problems with systemic corruption and is very poor. 1994, well, it wasn't better than it was now. It was just out of the Soviet Union. And things, I can see why these agreements were made. There was no way they were ever going to get rid of Russia's nukes. There's just it just couldn't be done then, and it can't be done now. But things in like Ukraine, straight out of the Soviet Union, things like this, it could have gone very differently to the way that it has gone. So I can see why things like that agreement was done. But nuclear weapons, these are a deterrent, and that is the protection. I can see what Zelensky's on about, that with those, they were protected, that they had that ultimate deterrent. And when he speaks about the right to have nukes, well, no one sort of has the right to have nukes, but it's still only one country that's ever used nuclear weapons. But as well, good luck trying to get any country to actually give up their nuclear weapons, especially Russia. It's Russia's main deterrent. It's sort of all Russia really has in its arsenal. So there's no way they're ever going to give them up. Like, we can speak on what should have been done, what shouldn't have done, but that's just whatever, because, well, they're there. Russia's not going to, no country is going to give them up. It's like that TikTok girl who's like reminding countries that all their nukes are illegal. You're like, yes, so what the fuck are you going to do with it? Like, they exist for a reason. And many, many people will say because of the amount of nuclear weapons in the world is why, for some reasons, we have so much stability also with the threat of mutually assured destruction, the MAD treaty, that no one will use them because it would just be a fucking end of the world situation. That this itself gives actually stability to these major powers. This is why we haven't seen a war between these major nuclear powers since when the nuclear weapons were first used, when they first came around in the 40s. We haven't seen that fight. We've only seen proxy wars with these countries, but as far as those major ones, we haven't. And many people put that actually to the credit of nuclear weapons, to give them, I guess, some credit, if you will. So, of course, we're going to have a look at the maps. Of course, we have Ukraine, the centre, the capital of Kyiv, red areas occupied since 22, and the purple since 14. Of course, this is the Black Sea down here and Crimea. Now, where we're going to go is we're going to go down into Dnieper River, down near Kherson, where we have seen some slight shift in here. So we do see just here, I don't know why I'm pointing at my screen, you can just see Ukraine make a little bit more ground there, and that falls in line then with what Syriac Maps says as well. Situational Kherson front, the recent Russian army bombardment over the small settlement of Dachi allowed to correct the front line in which Ukraine army controlled positions a little further south. So Russia's bombing that area. We know that Ukraine is in that area, and this could be somewhere that does a lot of leverage over the next coming months of the offensive as well. So let's look at what then the British MOD says. Really good time for me to get hiccups. Anyway, intelligence update. For the first half of September 23, heavy fighting has continued around the islands in the lower Dnipro in Kherson Oblast, which currently marks the front line. Both sides have launched raids with teams in small boats against the islands and against the opposite riverbanks. There is a realistic possibility that Russian operations in the area have been energised since the sector came under responsibility of the newly created 40 Army Corps. The number of forces involved are relatively small compared to other fronts. However, both sides see the area as strategically important. It also provides the opportunity to draw their adversaries' units away from intense combat in Zap and Donetsk Oblast. So, of course, down near Robotyne or Bakhmut. So, we know there's a number of islands up all through this area, as well as down near Ochakiv, this island here that is under Ukrainian control. But I do like when Syriac Maps and, of course, the Ukrainian Western sources deep state map do line up. Gives me some more confidence. Now, we haven't seen any change down to Robotyne. Now, it was like one of these, we're going to see a lot of movement now that that line is broken. We haven't seen any movement for, God, when? Back a long way. So really, like, let's go the 11th to the 19th. So really a good 7-8 days. We haven't really seen much movement there, but of course there's a lot of intense fighting going on. In Verbove, situation on the Zap front, Ukrainian army restarted the advances along the first Russian main defensive line, reaching the nearby outskirts of the town where the Russian army managed to repel the attack. So let's have a look at this exact area then on this map. So let's go to then the satellite view, bring this one up. So these will show probably very similar here. So we see this is this paddock. These are these angled paddocks out from here, that it's right on here. So that is that location. So no change there. That was a few days old. Syriac does go back a few days and forward a few days just to update things as things have come through and put it on the date. We're at 7.4 here and 7.1 on his map. So now Where I want to move up into, oh no, sorry, let's go back to here. What we do know as well, being rumoured from the ISW, from Russian sources, a bit of everything, so Western, Russian, in the middle sources, is that a lot of the VDV have actually gone from Bakhmut into Verbove, and maybe that was because Russia has lost a number of villages in around Bakhmut, that maybe they've then moved these guys into Verbove for more of a defensive posture there, but we know that there are more paratroopers there. Now we move up then into Uruzhanistan, Moscow. We haven't seen any real change here for a little bit, but near, where is the change? Just to the west of Novodonetsky, we will see that this is what it looked like on the 18th, and then Russia did make some ground up through there, so pushing that ground up. Now, of course, that just changes to green because it's been over 2 weeks. So, as we know, the blue is area that is before 2 weeks, so we haven't seen any blue, so it hasn't really been much change there in the blue for more now than 2 weeks, but Russia did manage to make some ground there. Now, the other map we look at, normally the daily Ukraine map update, doesn't show any changes here either. Let's then move up into Bakhmut. Now, we haven't seen any further change where we saw Ukraine get a lot of territory down around Kurtamivka, Andrivka, Klishkivka. We haven't seen any change there since we saw that Klishkivka came under Ukrainian control. But if we come up then into Kromove, up here, we do see no change on the deep state, but Suryak talks then about this. Ukraine-Russian War Day 571, situation north of Bakhmut. Recent video footage shows Russian army shelling Ukrainian positions in the small settlement of Kromove, which indicates Ukrainian troops managed to re-enter the locality for the first time since it was vacated last May. So this does show then Kromove here. Of course, this is the outskirts of Bakhmut. Now, this does show that it's sort of in no man's land at the moment. This would be grey zone, but it does show that Ukraine are right up in this area here. Now, where we're going to move up further is we're just going to keep going up until we see Svatov, as there has been some changes up in this area as well. And the ISW do say that in around this area there is less Russian control, but doesn't show any actual change. So Svatov, and then this Raihodka is what we're looking for in here. Now, this area, there's Nadia in here. Nadia, every time I hear that name, I think of, what's that movie? Fucking American Pie with the exchange student. Anyway, this is what we're talking about. 72. Situation Lugansk front. Recent bombardment to Russian army in Ukrainian positions in the forest adjacent to Nadia confirms the small village was recently recovered by the Ukrainian army. So it does say that the Russian army did bombard Ukrainian positions, but now that proves that Ukraine has taken up positions and retaken positions in Nadia here as well. And I do like Asurik does really jump around the map and look at every little bit and piece that has changed. But Legends, that is it from me today. Let me look over my folder. That's it. Legends, I hope you've had a fantastic day. My video yesterday just went shocking, and I thought it was really good, and I put a lot of time into that. So maybe go watch that if you'd like to support me. But Legends, look after yourself. I'll speak to you soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.